Well, hello and good morning, everyone, and welcome to Uncivil Law and my friend Nate Broady for the Uncivil Nate Broady Legal Hour Extravaganza.
Yes. This is gonna be fun. This is gonna be fun.
This is going
We
to be
get
fun, yes.
we
So,
we get to argue with each other once a week. So
no, yeah, that's exactly right. Once a week, we're working on a time, so we may move the time, but once a week, our working plan is to try to do this, and we'll have it on my channel and Nate's channel, and we will discuss happenings in the news, such as the Attorney General of Oregon getting smacked down, such as the ACLU apparently being opposed to people videoing things that happen in the street if those people are police and getting an injunction, such as the DC Court of Appeals issuing an en banc for Flynn for
on
some
bug,
reason
baby.
because apparently they're penance for pain. I don't know, but we will discuss these and other legal topics. So, and we also just discuss whatever else is happening in our life because why not? So we were just discussing our respective workouts. I have a little gym in my building that just reopened. It may close again because I'm in Texas, so God only knows. But they have one of those Peloton bikes. They're like $2,500 or something. But of course, because it's in my building, I get to use it for free. So I was just doing my workout there and doing some bent over rows with some dumbbells. And I took a shower, made some coffee. And Nate was telling me about the Body Project. Nate, tell our audience more about the wonders that is the Body Project.
I feel bad because I feel like I would be promoting their stuff, but it's a YouTube channel. I try to do low impact workouts, just safe on the knees and stuff. So I run, I do this, and it's a YouTube video. It's a couple of YouTube videos, and they're pretty good. It gives you a nice workout. It's a nice theme. So I would suggest if anybody just wants to work out from home and do some aerobics, it's a good place to start. But obviously,
Excellent.
the best thing you do is get outside. That's the only problem. The problem we're trying to work out now here, like all the
What's an
gyms are so
outside?
close. So, What's outside, right?
What's an outside?
I don't know. It's so insane. Because I've been researching the whole COVID-19 thing, and most people believe that that the first case happened like November, December, but I've just been looking at all of the evidence that the news media has been putting out, especially like ABC News has done this documentary on the first cases of coronavirus. When did China actually know? And they went back, and just so everyone knows what Google does, you know how Google does the Google Maps here, and they go and film everything. So that you have the car come here in New York, the car comes by like once a month or once every couple of months. So Google does that in China, in Wuhan, China. So what the news media did is that they took those images that Google was using and just went to the hospital parking lots and took all the hospitals in Wuhan and took pictures of their parking lots. Took the stills of the parking lots for like the past 3 years. So you see in each year in October, you had like almost like, I'll say, I'm making this number up, 10 cars, like a very few cars every year, around that time. In October 2019, the parking lots in all the hospitals in Wuhan were full to capacity. The parking lot. So that means you had almost full capacity with cars in the hospital parking lots at the start of the pandemic. And China came out and said their first case was in October, but that can't be correct, because if all the hospitals have all this traffic in early October, that means that the pandemic had to have started earlier. We're talking about September and maybe in August, where they didn't tell anybody that they had this, and to show that type of difference shows that it was interesting. I was going to cut a video about this, calling it the Chinese virus, but I know people are going to be like, "Oh, it's some racial tones and everything." But I wasn't going to when I told my wife, I'm like, I'm going to name it. She's like, "No, because we're going to call you racist." And I'm like, but I'm not saying it to be racist. I'm saying it because it's true.
Because you're black. Those are the rules or something.
That's true.
I don't know.
Yeah.
No, you're capable of racism.
I wasn't. I wasn't saying it because of race. I was saying it because
country. There's a country called
that. The country not only the country hid this from the world until it became a problem that nobody can stop. You know what I'm saying?
Are you suggesting that China may from time to time not be fully honest in reporting on what's going on in its country vis-a-vis, say, Corona, or say vis-a-vis the Uyghurs who are being carted off to concentration camps and re-educated and all kinds of stuff like it's 1940s Germany style? You're saying that they might not be fully honest about that?
I'm saying they are the Chinese government. I do not trust with anything, and this kind of opened my eyes to two things. Number one, the news media dropped the ball here because anybody could have done this. Why did it take so long? And then all of them kept demeaning Trump all that time, and Trump kept saying China's been lying to us. China's been lying to us, and now you have the evidence that they've been lying to us for almost over a year with this thing. So it is what it is. I feel bad for where we're at. But I really want to put the blame where, Trump is not to blame for the virus. I would say Trump is to blame for what's going on now. But with the actual virus, Trump, it had nothing to do with Trump. It's the Chinese government who put this pandemic on us. So,
well, yeah, and the fact that they were arresting and putting under house arrest, and at least in some cases seemed to be welding people into their homes.
Yeah,
in order to suppress knowledge of it. So there were doctors that were trying to raise the alarm who were then welded into their homes to prevent them from reporting out. So China may not exactly be the free paradise of wonder that some people seem to want to pretend it is sometimes.
Well, you see what's going on in Hong Kong.
A somewhat oppressive regime.
Yeah. And you see what's going on in Hong Kong, right? Hong Kong is just, it's all blowing up over there.
You mean everything is fine and there's no problems of any kind? That's what I learned from the Chinese media.
Well, I don't watch Chinese media, thank God.
Yeah.
That's
China,
pretty bad media.
Hong Kong and Taiwan and the Uyghurs, everything is awesome. Everything is cool when you move to the beat and when you're part of the team.
Yeah.
So, that's what I learned from watching China. Everything is fine.
You know what? I did want to ask you this, right? So, and obviously, my feelings on Trump. He made me feel great the other day, right? When he started talking about wearing masks, doing this, he seemed like he was on board. Then he tweets out this thing about this doctor, and I'm just like, what are we doing here? Like, why the mixed messages? Now I'm still back on hydroxychloroquine. I got part of his team, his CDC director, this guy saying it's all debunked. Then he tweets out a doctor saying it's good. So it's like, I don't know what to think anymore. And now he, with this, it seems like there's a lot of mixed messages. Is Trump in favor of masks or not? At this point, I just don't know.
Well, there is a rule that Jordan Peterson says this. It's like if you really want to hurt someone, what you do is you punish them when they're doing something right.
Yeah,
that's the real way to really do that. So, regardless of whatever you think about Trump, presumably wearing masks or not wearing masks, one of these has to be the right option. And my point is, no matter which he does, the news media blames him and controls him. So no matter what the right answer is in this equation, should Trump do more or do less? Should he intervene more or do less? It would be good for Trump to intervene more to reduce things, or does that make him an authoritarian dictator? It's like you shouldn't punish people when they're doing what you think is right. And so regardless of whatever you think the correct position is, the media just will flip the script to whatever it has to be. He wears a mask, they yell at him. He intervenes, he's authoritarian. He doesn't intervene, he doesn't care. He wants to reopen schools, it's because he hates people. He doesn't want to reopen schools, it's because he doesn't think teachers are important. You literally can't win. And that is more than a little bit frustrating.
But I don't think that's a Trump problem. I think that's an anybody problem. Right? Anybody who's in office. When Obama was there, they were saying the same thing. Obama could do no right. If he talks if he talks to Kim Jong-il, he's a bad guy. If he doesn't talk to him, he's a bad guy. So I think with politics, you have to kind of walk that fine line. But I think the safest position to be with politicians is with the scientists and the doctors. You say the scientists and doctors say we got to do this, we can do this. But it's frustrating.
But then again, their reliability is a little bit questionable because, as I pointed out, Fauci it was saying don't wear masks not because he didn't believe in their prudence, but because he thought it was good to give that message so people wouldn't use them, so other people, the more important people, could. And the reports from the health professionals who have put out statements like systemic racism is a health threat, which seems slightly odd, but it's a health threat to the point where it's okay to protest for systemic racism, even in the face of COVID, but not okay to protest for any other reason. So I'm not 100% sure I can even take my health professionals' word for it at this point, because their messaging seems to be all over the place.
But I do agree with you. I agree with you a couple of things. First, yes, it was interesting to see how the media, when they do agree with something, how they accept it. Like, okay, this is okay for us. It's okay for the protest because systemic racism is a bad thing. But when they did have the protest against the closures, they demonize these people, right? The first thing they said, they're not wearing masks, they're doing this, they're violating all the social distance orders.
Mm-hmm.
So even me, because I consider myself to be independent, I called that out. My position is, if it's not right to protest because of this public health threat, then it's just not right to protest. Now you can say, okay, we understand this protest may be more meaningful, or we agree, but the news media can't come out and support either side, so they have to say, so it's like they have to create the narrative to say, well, this one is bad because it can spread the virus, but this one is okay because I even heard people saying, well, they're outside. And I'm like, well, if you're outside, that's a good thing. But so why isn't it good for the other people? But so I do think politics, when it gets to politics and medicine, when they come together, they become strange bedfellows.
Well, politics just ruins everything. Full stop. Politics ruins all the things. Yeah. When things become political, it becomes impossible to have conversations. And I think we should have conversations. For example, I was recently doing a stream with Progressive Lib, or Pro Lib, as he likes to sometimes call himself, and we were discussing various policies in prison reform. And discussing some of the points of prison. What are the points of prison? Why do we punish people? And what is the value of work, and so forth and so on. And he said something very left. I guess it's a left-leaning point. All work has equal value. And my brain is like that. I don't even know where to start with that statement. But it's like yes, you should be charging exactly the same for your service as the ice cream cone maker. If the surgeon who performs the kidney surgery and the person working behind the counter at Ben & Jerry's, these are of equal value to me. I'm like, I don't know about that one, Pro-Lib. That seems like a strange position, but okay.
No, I think, well, no. Pro-Lib, like I've heard him say that. Pro-Lib's position was that all work has value, but it doesn't have the same value. It's like it's a difference between horizontal equity and vertical equity. Vertical equity, everybody has the same value, but then the vertical sense, a doctor is getting paid more because the training has to be more. There's so there's more equity built in because of what you had to do to get that, versus someone who could just wake up one morning and go make hot dogs for it. So that, I think that's what his position is. But again, I honestly feel capitalism is the best position. Yeah, and I think most people agree with that. It's one, right?
I think capitalism is the best position because it decentralizes the problem of value. Like how much is something worth? And capitalism solves that problem. It solves that problem because it's the
market determines it.
The market determines. It's as much as what anyone's willing to pay for it. And that's the best answer because everyone is the judge of their own value. And everyone is in the position to make those individual assessments. And then when we talk about what the value of something is, it's based on the collective assessment.
But I would also say, I disagree with unrestrained capitalism versus a regulated capitalism. It's in the sense of, I don't think everything should just be open up to free market principles, right? If for instance, there are people there who can't afford to educate their children. So we have socialized education so they can educate the children. But if it was just free market, then we'd have, the majority of the population wouldn't be able to afford educating their children because it would cost too much, based on the salaries and so forth and so forth. So I think there are certain things, I think when you're talking about business and that type of, yes, the best ideas survive. But I think there are just some social things that you can't let the market just dictate the price. Police services, fire services, we have to collectively do that together for the good of the economic system.
Well, so I think you say that, but right now they're saying like defund the police. So at this point, I guess we're going all privatized again.
What do you think about that?
I think it's a horrible idea, man. I think that the police in general are doing too many things. They have been relied on for too many things. I disfavored closing mental hospitals and asylums, and we essentially request the police to deal with mental health issues, even though and the criminal justice system writ large, for that matter, in a way that is completely inappropriate. So I'd love to bring back more mental health care, more mental hospitals, more asylums, more things like that. And we should be looking for various things in social services. When it comes to drug policy, for example, I have no particular objection to treatment as part of a tool, as a methodology. For that matter, I think we should legalize marijuana, because I think the case against the legalization of marijuana doesn't really make any sense. You know, I have this baseline position, as I was explaining in the prolog. My baseline position is everything should be legal unless it's not. And so you need a justification. You need a justification to make everything illegal. And a lot of things, that's not really hard. Don't need a lot of logical thinking of why is it bad for me to break into people's homes.
Yeah.
Well, for no other reason, I don't want people breaking into my home. You know, reciprocity reciprocity gets you a long way when it comes to justification for a lot of these things. But it's like, okay, what are the collective benefits for marijuana being illegal? What are the collective costs? And I'm like, this equation doesn't make any sense in my mind. Also, as I was pointing out to him, as a conservative, I like categories. And marijuana right now is category 1, schedule 1. And definitionally, it has to have no medical use. And I'm like, no.
Yeah, that doesn't make sense.
So back to the original question of what do I think of defunding the police? I think demilitarizing the police is probably good in large part. I think we need to think very heavily about giving police equipment that's former military equipment, especially on a use it or lose it policy, which they seem to sometimes have. If you don't use it, you lose this equipment. So it creates incentives. Plus, if it's there, they're going to use it anyway. So demilitarizing the police, I think, is a good idea. Transferring some of their funding to mental health hospitals and mental health care is a good idea. Doing some things in drug treatment policy, probably a good idea. So I'm warm to this. But there are some people, because people say, well, defund the police, that doesn't mean abolish the police. And then there's some people who say, no, what we really mean is we really mean abolish the police. And I'm like, that doesn't even make any sense.
Yeah, I think the radical left is saying abolish the police. They're not saying defund the police. Defund the police for the radical left is a means to an end, is a means to abolishing the police. Okay, I don't agree with that at all, right?
Yeah.
Defund the police.
And the Chaz Chop proves you can't do it anyway. Because the Chaz Chop, they expel the police and then just immediately create police.
Because you need. I remember that.
Yeah, they immediately create the police. What do they do? Well, they create borders. They create border walls. They create police. And it's like, wait a second, what's going on now?
They should have called themselves Trump land. No, you're right. You're right. Here are the borders. Here are our police. But I think to go back to the original question of defunding the police, I don't agree with defunding the police. What I do agree with is reallocating resources, right? If we can reallocate resources and use them more effectively for policing, for law enforcement, for those type of things, then yes, if you want to, take some of those funds and say, well, we can use these funds to treat mental health, in this law enforcement context, because police get called to everything. If there's a crazy man who needs some mental health issues, police go there. So that's what I'm saying. I think like what New York City did scared me. They removed $1 billion from the police budget. That's scary because that was ad hoc and it was just done overnight. Like, we just need to do this just to satisfy that. And we don't vote people in to just do what the mob tells them to do. We want, I expect them to be rational, to explain, okay, this is, us losing $1 billion is still going to keep as many cops walking around here. It's going to keep my city safe. It's going to do this. There has to be some methodology better than we just took $1 billion off the police rolls. You know what I'm saying? That's what scares me now, is because I think cities like New York,
right?
It seems like we forgot what it was in the 90s when we had, like when we had 2,000 or 3,000 murders a year and stuff like that. It seems like people forgot why the police funding went up. So
that seems like a strange thing. I mean, I mean, that's within everyone's living memory, right? Pretty much collectively, the 90s. I mean, before Giuliani did great things when he first came in. Then he went a little nutso, but young Giuliani was good Giuliani when he was the U.S. attorney and he was the mayor and stuff like that. He did some great stuff.
I voted for Giuliani.
Young Giuliani was good Giuliani.
I just was sad that Giuliani couldn't run after 9/11 because he was time limited out, so he couldn't run. But yeah, Giuliani was a great mayor. I don't care what anybody says. He's a bad guy now, but he was a fantastic mayor.
He was a great U.S. attorney. He did some great stuff on
breaking
up the
great
mob.
U.S.
He did great
attorney.
work on RICO. He cleaned up New York. He in large part got rid of the mob in New York.
Yes, all that. So
He cleaned. He did the whole broken windows thing. He got rid of the red light districts of New York City, which were seedy as f.
Yeah.
You remember those old school New York with the adult theaters and the dime shows and all that stuff, and some really, really seedy stuff. And he cleaned up all that and made it kind of adult Disneyland-esque. And now it's a nice place to be. And people apparently have really short memories because it's like, man, I don't know, man. It didn't work out that well when we weren't enforcing the law in New York. It kind of was a hellhole there for a little bit there.
Yes. No, I lived it. I lived it. And I'll say this. The reason why I supported Giuliani while he was mayor, I didn't support him when he first ran. He first ran against a guy named Dinkins. It was the first black mayor of New York, and that's who Giuliani was running against. And it was such a bad. New York at that time was horrible. And I don't know if you guys probably don't know this because you guys aren't in New York, but back then we had a Republican state senator, which is unheard of in New York, but we did have, his name was Al D'Amato, I believe it was, but he was a Republican senator. And I think he was our last Republican senator. And Giuliani, and they wanted to show how bad it was in New York City, like how bad, because Giuliani was the U.S. attorney. And they said, well, we want to show people how bad it is in the minority communities. This is why we're doing this. So they got a news crew, jumped into a van, and went right to the hood, and said, well, will people be so bold to sell the U.S. attorney and a sitting U.S. senator cocaine? And they went out and bought cocaine off the street. And people were saying, this is the U.S. attorney. Yeah, don't. How much do you want? In the middle. That's where New York was at. Then after 8 years of Giuliani, it was a totally different place. So don't get me wrong. There were a lot of people hurt by
the feds. Would you like some cocaine?
Yes.
This is great.
And here you go. Nice. But in that transition from that New York to the New York we have today, there were a lot of missteps, right? There was a lot of innocent people, like, for instance, I was stopped and frisked multiple times. Oh, yes. And I didn't do anything wrong. There was a lot of wrong things. Stop and frisk policy. That was just blatantly unconstitutional. We're going to stop black people from being black and search them. That's unconstitutional. But I think you learn from your mistakes. And then at the end, you have to realize, okay, stop and frisk was a bad policy. But some parts of the broken windows policy was too heavy-handed. Why are we sending people to jail for years for stealing a backpack? We had a case in the Bronx where there was a guy who stole a backpack. And even if he was convicted of stealing a backpack, he would have done 60 days in jail. But because of the pre-trial, he wanted to go to trial. He's like, I didn't do this. I'm going to go to trial. He spent almost 1.5 years on Rikers Island and committed suicide. So he spent almost 2 to 3 times more time in jail for fighting a charge where if he'd have pleaded guilty, he would have been out almost a year ago. But that showed you the problem with our system, because it just didn't make any sense. And that's what they were trying to reform with bill reform and all this other stuff, which went
too far the other way.
Yeah,
so now you have people on 2nd-degree felonies with manslaughter and stuff, and like, oh, we're going to bail you out, and bank robbery and some stuff. It's like it went too far the other way. But I guess this is the pendulum. But I guess goes back to one of your earlier points about trying to do things in a more deliberative way and thinking things through, instead of being so reactionary or so radical, depending on which end of the spectrum you're on. When you're just making these quick changes, it seems like you're never thinking things through. So should we take $1 billion from the New York City police budget? I have no idea. The question is, what are we doing with that $1 billion instead? And trying to think through the probable implications of that. No one can see the future, so you can only game so much stuff out, but at least try. And use history as partly of your guide, the hard knocks of history, and how we got to certain places. But it's like, let's just take $1 billion for the hell of it. It's like, okay, did you think about that at all?
No.
Anyway, did you use anything resembling a thought process? Did a thought go through your brain at any point in this discussion?
It was.
All right, what would that mean? What are we doing with it? What does that? What does it actually mean to take $1 billion? Are we closing police precincts? Are we taking police off the streets? How many police will there be? Is it reducing 911? Is it reducing investigation? What does that actually mean to take $1 billion? What does that mean? No one wants to have that discussion. Apparently, let's just take $1 billion because it's a nice big round number.
And people will be happy and clapping for us. But you know what I suspect is really going to happen? They took the $1 billion, but during the year when the police need that money, they'll give it back to them. They're not stupid. You know what I'm saying? It's like we're defunding them by $1 billion, but then they get those emergency requests. Hey, we need X amount of money to hire some more people. Okay, you know what? We'll give you the $500 million for that. Oh, so
it's not really taking $1 billion. It's just doing this motion.
Yeah, because you can't just defund the police department. It just does. You know what I'm saying? Without any type of, you can't do it in a day. You know what I'm saying? So there are contingencies they got worked out. Obviously, and I think it's just a big. So what? We're defunding the police. Let the mob be happy. But now, you know what? I had to ask.
I don't want the mob to be happy. I hate everybody, Nate. I hate them all.
I got to ask you because
you know what the problem with democracy is, right? People.
What's the problem?
People.
People
suck.
Listen,
problem.
we got to talk about the Flynn thing, bro. We got.
I have no problem with that. I have no problem. You were right. I was wrong, and you should be able to gloat. No.
But I got to make my position clear for all you people out there watching. My position is Flynn should not be in jail. Right? I've said that many times. I've always said that. I think Flynn's prosecution was ridiculous, right? I do. I think his prosecution was ridiculous. I don't think Flynn should spend a day in jail for this. Yes, he lied to the police. I don't even think that should even be a charge. You know what I'm saying? So I'm with you guys. If you guys are saying Flynn should be out of jail, we agree. Outcome, fine. But how we get there is where the disagreement is. Now, I thought
I'm all about process, Nate. So I'm a process guy. So that's fine. We can talk process.
So what were your? Well, first, my argument was that the appeals court ruling just didn't make sense in the context of what happened in the actual case. And I know they quoted Farker and all this other stuff. And the issue now that's going en banc is whether Flynn, whether the prosecution more or less was over. That's literally what we're talking about. Because in one instance, they're saying the prosecution wasn't over. That's what Bill Barr was saying yesterday. I was watching this clip. He was saying the prosecution wasn't over, right? Even though Flynn had pleaded guilty twice, the prosecution wasn't over. And Sullivan is saying the prosecution was over. So where are we in that particular thing? Was the prosecution over or was it not? Because if the prosecution was over, then there's no prosecutorial discretion to exercise. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that makes total sense. Yeah, so there's an operative question there. Now, I take note that if you are found guilty and you're appealing, if you die in the course of that, then normally that strikes the conviction completely because you still have your due process, right?
Yeah.
Because so it wasn't finalized. So until the Court of Appeals, until you appeal and the Court of Appeals renders its decision, it's not really truly final. So there is an operative question here in terms of bifurcation of process, where we could split things or we could not split things. We could look at a criminal trial in multiple different segments, or we could view them as one continuous whole. And we could view those, even when we view them as segments, we can view them more segmenty or less segmenty. So one of the segments we might draw is what we might call the guilt or liability phase of a trial versus the damages phase. This is most apparent in capital cases where this is really clear, where they'll separate it and they'll even have kind of two trials. Yeah. So they'll have the guilt phase, liability phase. Did you do the thing? And then they'll essentially have a completely separate trial with new evidence because different things are now relevant and admissible. And in terms of the guilt phase.
And just can I
sure.
just so the fans know how different those phases are. Evidence that's not allowed in the in the liability phase is actually allowed in the sentencing phase. So if it's evidence of propensity, that's not allowed in the guilt phase, but it is allowed in the sentencing phase. So you can show propensity, you can show hearsay, you can do all these things that you could not do in the actual trial, you can do in the sentencing phase. So they are essentially two separate processes with two separate rules. Go ahead.
Yes. So that's the clearest delineation between the two. And you can even do that in your run-of-the-mill civil case where you can sometimes you'll even do that with agreement between the parties. Sometimes you'll even go so far as to say, we want a really separated liability phase and a separated damages phase in terms of it. So sometimes you can really split those apart. So one of the questions might be, well, first of all, did Flynn actually plead guilty? Because Barnes was raising this issue. And I think he raises some good technical points. The first judge that he pled to recused himself, so that might not count. And the second judge, Sullivan, he never actually finished the standard colloquy. So he may not have actually pled guilty. So maybe none of those guilty pleas count. So that's one thing. But putting that aside and assuming he did plead guilty, the question is, having found the liability, does that remove the discretion from the prosecutor to drop the case completely? Now, the prosecutor still has some ability to intervene because they can still recommend sentences and, come forward with their ideas, but the judge's sentencing discretion is pretty wide. And so the prosecution can say minimum time, the defense can say minimum time, and the judge, as long as he meets the standards, can say, how about not minimum? How does not minimum work for you? Or vicariously, maximum. I don't know why the defense would say maximum, but hypothetically, if the defense said maximum and the prosecution said maximum, the judge could say, how about not maximum? I don't know why that would happen, but anyways.
You're right.
So there is a question, and so Nate raises a good technical point here that maybe Sullivan, having pled guilty, there's nothing for the prosecution to do except to participate or not in the sentencing phase. So the prosecution doesn't want to show up in the sentencing phase and says, screw you, judge, I don't want to show up in the sentencing phase.
They don't have to.
They don't have to. They don't have to come forward and do that. And sometimes prosecutors will do that just because they want to leave it to the judge's discretion for whatever reason. It's like, just let them figure it out. I can't be bothered. So there's the question there. So there's this technical question of, can the prosecution drop the case or not, which I think is an interesting technical question. There's also the second technical question, which is, can Judge Sullivan ask for the en banc? Does he have standing, which was part of our chat discussion yesterday, which, because we were talking on text, we couldn't really flush it out. But it seems to me, and feel free to correct me if you disagree with me, but it seems to me that every reversal from an appeal court includes a remand, and the remand is at least, proceedings consistent with this opinion. And sometimes it's more specific than that. But every reversal includes an order, to do something. And so the writ of mandamus is special in so much as whether it should be granted or not. It's a rare order to grant. But it being granted, once that decision is made, it's not special in sort of its consequence. It's special in terms of the procedure of it. But once it's granted, it's just an order like a reversal. A reversal is an order to do something. A writ of mandamus is an order to do something. So if a writ of mandamus gives Sullivan standing, then it would seem logically that every reversal would also give Sullivan, and implication, all district judges, standing. So suddenly all 94 districts in the United States, every time they're reversed, they get to ask for an en banc. Is this a thing we're doing now where the judges suddenly get to intervene? And if they're unhappy with that, presumably the judge themselves is the one asking for certiorari? Is this a thing we're doing now? Because that's where I'm like, this doesn't make any sense. So feel free to correct me on any of that.
Well, first, I think there are a couple of different things. When we talk about a mandamus, right? You're telling the court to do something, right? And I think you make an astute point that even when they remand other cases, they're telling the court to do something, either vacate the judgment, and here's the way we want you to do it. But there are a couple of different moving parts, and that's why I think this case is so interesting. The first moving part is the judge is saying, and when you read through the judge's I forgot, it was with his brief, Sullivan's brief, or the attorney who wrote Sullivan's brief.
Yeah,
there are a couple of things that they're trying to hit at. Number one, Flynn pleaded guilty twice, right? He pleaded guilty for his other jobs, he recused himself, then he pleaded guilty again. So they have two guilty pleas. And he did that under penalty of perjury. So now, after he's pleaded guilty, I've done this under penalty of perjury, I'm not lying. And then a month later, I lied, right? Essentially, I'm not guilty. So Judge Sullivan is saying, well, that is a problem. And the problem is that we have now someone who's more or less admitting to committing perjury, and the government saying, okay, now we believe that he's not guilty too. So he's kind of saying, so what do I do with that? So both of them, the government and the defendant, they filed a motion. and the judge was supposed to rule on that motion, right? I'm going to rule on the motion. Let me get arguments for both sides. Instead of waiting for the judge to rule on that motion, which he legally has the right to do, right? He's a district court judge. He's empowered to rule on this motion. He says, I'm going to rule on this motion. Before he's able to rule, there's an appeal that goes up to the circuit court. Now, the circuit court has the power to overrule judges. If the judge had already ruled something, they have the authority to overrule that, right? To say, well, you've ruled this, and we believe you're wrong on the law. That's the authority. You're wrong on the law, and this is the way you should render it. So we're going to vacate your other judgment, and this is the way you should look at it. These are the principles that you should set out, and now redo it based on those principles. Here, that's not what happened. Here, what it was is the judge was saying, well, I don't know how to rule, so I want to figure it out. And then they went to the appeals court and said, well, hey, force this judge to rule this way. They had the arguments and they came down with the mandamus. You must dismiss it this way. So now the judge is saying, well, this court has now taken the authority from me to make a ruling on the merits. The appeals court now made the ruling on the merits. So now my authority to make a ruling on the merits has been removed. So that, I think, gives him enough standing to say, well, hold on. This court not only got it wrong, but now the appeals court is ruling on the merits of the case. If it would have been better if he'd have made the ruling and then they would have overturned it. But by them injecting themselves into that process, they are now making a ruling based on the merits, which they technically can do with a mandamus. But in other rulings, they're not doing that. The ruling has already been made on the merits, and they're just checking the law. Do you understand the difference that I'm trying to explain?
Yes, I do. And so there's a fair point. I suppose in every reversal, there is the implication that there was only one legally correct thing to do because you overturned on the law. So every reversal includes a finding of no, there was only one legally compelled result. So I guess it's sort of like an interlocutory appeal, essentially. It's like a writ of mandamus is, because you're issuing it while the proceedings are ongoing rather than at the end. So the writ of mandamus is unusual in that it's coming in the middle. It is kind of functionally the same in some respect because both the writ of mandamus and the reversal are essentially saying there was one legally correct thing to do and you screwed it up. The difference is the timing of it. It's already happened versus we think it's going to happen. So that's unusual. I suppose and also the writ of mandamus is rare. I suppose the prejudice is such that if the answer is this clear that we can intervene. So it strikes me as very similar to an interlocutory appeal where it's like I'm appealing some sort of order or finding or something, and you're pointing out, well, the order hadn't even come yet, so it's even worse than that. But yeah, I understand. I'm not sure I can split the difference that cleanly, but I understand the point you're making. Maybe I need to think about it more.
Well, to me, it's all procedural, right? There are two big issues here. The first, the procedural piece with Flynn. Right? Did he actually plead guilty? If he did plead guilty, now we have this issue. And I think that's what the appeals court is going to have to deal with. What does it mean for them to dismiss the charges with him already pleading guilty, with him all this? What does that mean? Now, is he now innocent? What discretion was the prosecution going to have anyway? Right? He had already pleaded guilty. What were they going to do? What did we force them to do that they shouldn't have done? Right? They could have just walked out. The judge is saying, I didn't force them to do anything. They could walk out. It's a sentencing recommendation. He's already pleaded guilty. They've already done their job. I think also, but on the second piece, when it comes to the mandamus, it's kind of like the judge was deciding, well, should I do it or shouldn't I do it? Or, should I dismiss it or shouldn't I dismiss it? Boom. Now you have the appeals court, which technically, at this instance, even with the locatory appeals, usually the judge will say, this evidence is no good, right? And we're throwing it out. Then you get the interlocutory appeal. The court says, well, the test you used was wrong. Now reevaluate it based on this. Or they can say, no, this should be let in because there's no other option, right? There's no other option. So I think that would be different. That would be what you're talking about. But I think at the end of the day, here the problem is I think the appeals court overstepped its bounds because the appeals court generally do not make rulings on the merits. And that's what essentially did in this case. They ruled on the merits, right? On the merits, Flynn should win. There's no other way we can see it. Issue the writ of mandamus. And the judge said, well, hold on, that's not your job. My job is to make the ruling on the merits. If I did that and you reversed it, that's one thing. But you can't make the ruling on the merits and then all of a sudden, tell me that it's all good. No, I'm going to go to Umbuck and say, well, at least let me make the ruling on the merits, and then if they want to appeal it, then sure they can do it. So you're right. It maybe it's a technical issue, but that's where we live. We're lawyers. We live in the four corners.
That's the best point you've made yet. Maybe it's a technical point, but that's where we live. I'm like, yeah, I can't argue with that one. That's what we do all day long. Make these fine distinctions, right? It's like, yeah, maybe it's a technical point, but it's like, yeah, well, maybe it's a technical point. Yeah. So, I can't argue with that. Yeah. So I think it'll be, yeah, maybe there is a technical point there that somehow the writ of mandamus is different, and the writ of mandamus is extraordinary relief. So the Court of Appeals could, well, there's still the standing issue that's a problem. So if we get that's a problem. If we get past that issue and we get into should the writ of mandamus issue, I think your logic on the merits is better, because the trial judge should be allowed to make the mistake and then reverse, I think is a sound position. I think the other argument makes sense too, but I think your argument makes equal sense and perhaps better sense. So then it's an issue, can Sullivan ask for this? And if he can we differentiate what's happening under the writ of mandamus versus interlocutory appeal versus normal appeal versus whatever? And can we separate it in that sense?
And this is the way I would do it. It's just a simple question. Did the lower court make a ruling on the merits? If they did, then you got no problem, right? They have no argument, because now the appeals court has total jurisdiction and total authority to do it. Here, I think the appeals court just jumped the gun. And I think that's the standing issue has to deal with. Was Judge Sullivan, in his role as federal district judge, was his ability to do his job, or was his constitutional authority in any way infringed by the appeals court? In his constitutional authority at that time, at the trial level, is to issue these rulings, right? Is to issue this ruling based on this motion to dismiss. At this point in time, he hadn't issued a ruling, right? He was considering what to do, right? And the trial judge and the trial court is the judge of the facts, right? They get the facts, and they are the ones who make the rulings on the merits. The appeals court makes the rulings on the law. In this situation, generally in all these other situations, they've made their ruling, and now the appeals court is judging the lower court's ruling, their ruling based on the law. Now that's why I think the en banc opinion vacated the appeals court, is because essentially what they were saying was, this was a appeals court looking at the case, when you read through the thing and making a ruling on the merits. Mm-hmm. That's extraordinary. That's extraordinary. It doesn't usually happen. That's law school 101, right? Appeals courts rule on the law. Trial courts rule on the merits. That's where I think Judge Sullivan gets his standing from.
Let me ask you this question: do you think a writ of mandamus in general is of this character, where it is a ruling on the merits? Or do you think that the mandamus in this case is ruling on the merits, unlike most writs of mandamus, which are not? So is this writ of mandamus special in being a decision on the merits where that would not be typically true, in your view?
I don't know. Because I'm thinking about the most famous mandamus everybody probably knows is the one for Marbury V Madison, right?
Yeah, Marbury V Madison, the greatest one of all.
Yes,
the one that says we have the authority to hear cases. Yeah.
yeah. That's the most famous writ of mandamus that's ever been. And obviously telling a government official to issue a order to do something, you're more or less taking that authority or taking that choice away from them, saying you must do it, and they didn't do it. So I think it all depends, which again, I hate saying this, but it all depends on when the issue is made, when the mandamus is made, and for what reason. Again, if this trial court judge said, I'm denying it, right? And then they went up and said, we want the reversal, and we want you to order and issue a mandamus to force them to approve it, That's it. Now we're talking about a whole different ball game, right? Because we got a ruling, we're going to vacate that ruling, and now we're going to order through a mandamus that you actually enter. Well, they didn't have to put a mandamus. They said we just have to enter an order for the case to be dismissed, and we're not even talking about this because it's an appellate court ruling, right? So it's not what's done, but when it's done and how it's done within the process.
Well, I love this argument because it's so technically well mapped, and that appeals to me. I love the technical mapping of it. So I think you've done a very good job in making your case, at least to my mind. It appeals to my sensibilities.
I'm an okay lawyer. I'm an okay lawyer.
You're an okay lawyer. You have correctly deduced what I, as I guess your judge for this purpose, had what my sensibilities are, and mapped your argument to my sensibilities. So it's like, well, you're making the right line of argument, so that's very entertaining.
No, I honestly think, and just to be clear, my prediction is the en banc court is going to reverse the lower court, right? It's two Trump judges. That's going to happen. But I think the Supreme Court is then going to overrule the en banc court. But I think they're going to do it. But I think they're going to do it on a different technical matter than this, because you can't, because here it's just so messy. This whole thing is just so messy. So.
Yeah, well, the last time we had a writ of mandamus go to the Supreme Court was Marbury V Madison. So, right, basically,
and that didn't go well.
That's actually true, but yeah, it's like, so it's going to be Marbury versus Madison, and now Flynn becomes a byword in constitutional law for the next 200 years. That's good news. That's great. That's what I definitely wanted. That's what I wanted to have happen. Yeah. So yeah, we got a 10-member court with 7 Democrats and 3 Republicans. So you would anticipate the Seventh Circuit will uphold the district court, which means that's a decision that's prejudicial against Flynn and the Department of Justice for that matter. So then either of them can ask for certiorari, and then I guess Roberts has to figure out what to do. And now this is being heard by the Supreme Court, I suppose, because they don't meet until the first Monday in October. So they can meet and they can issue a decision after the election, I guess.
Trump should just pardon them.
They don't normally act that fast.
Trump should just pardon them. I think if it goes this far, I think if they reverse, Trump is going to pardon. It just makes sense. It's just like, all right, it's just there is no issue, and then they can deal with this forever. If Trump just pardons them, why go through this whole mess? Why make him spend? Because now Flynn's got to spend more money. They got to move more briefs and all this. Just pardon the guy.
That's not as legally fun, Nate, for you and to me. No, that's not as fun. Where we try to figure out the greater implications of what's going on here. $10 from Tony says, let's throw money at the boys.
Thank you, Tony.
You can always throw money at these boys. The boys appreciate the money thrown. Make it rain hard. So you got to tell me, with this Flynn thing, do you agree it's probably going to be overturned and then the Supreme Court's going to overturn that? Is that seems likely at this point? Yeah, that seems likely at this point.
Yeah, I agree with you, and I want to make it very clear because I know people are going to be out there screaming. I think Flynn should be free. I'm just talking about the technical issues of the law and how I'm seeing it. Not that Flynn was screwed. Yes, Flynn was screwed. Period. So hopefully he'll be out of jail.
I think the Supreme Court's incentives are to prevent district courts from asking for review from courts of appeal and/or the Supreme Court. So I think that's the basis of the Supreme Court's eventual decision. I love how I'm forecasting the opinion in a case that's not even been submitted to the Supreme Court yet, let alone decided by the Court of Appeals. I'm already ruling. Okay, so who writes this thing? Presumably Chief Justice Roberts writes this thing as Chief Justice. So Chief Justice Robert writes an opinion that'll come out. When's the election? November the 7th. So come out November the 8th. that says no, because district judges don't have standing to raise these issues, and so it must be dismissed. And I suppose that will be a 5-4 vote. I guess maybe 6-3. So I'm forecasting arguments and results in things that's not going to happen for 5 months. This is my life now.
It all depends on how they look at this thing now. It's how do you look at this thing? You feel bad for Flynn. But then you also got the fact that, he's got 2 on the record confessions under penalty of perjury. Then you got this, then you got this. So God bless him. But I think Flynn I think Flynn's going to be overturned, and hopefully President Trump will come in. Hey, listen, this was over. Just to stop all this, and it'll be done. Maybe he should do it today, because I think Roger Stone's his commutation would be more controversial than Flynn's. You know what I'm saying? Everybody know, Flynn was duped. Flynn was duped. We all know Flynn was duped. The FBI should have closed the case on Flynn. They went there trying to get him to lie. Flynn should be gone. So I think the political pressure
for political reasons, which is great too. And as I was pointing out on my channel, like 18 USC 1001 is like the federal government's favorite thing in the world. Lying to a federal official. They set up these traps all the time. It's like their favorite charge in the world, and they do it. They do all the time. The political motivations, the way they went about it, the fact they didn't notify the the White House counsel when they were supposed to, the fact they didn't give him the right warnings and so forth and so on, the fact they threatened his family, which again is not an unusual prosecutorial tactic.
It's not.
Nate, should I ask you, when you were an attorney in New York, did you ever obtain a plea from a defendant by suggesting, if they didn't plead, that you may go after other people? Was that ever a tactic that you used, or do you not want to talk about that?
All right. In my cases, because I really handled mostly misdemeanors. I had 1 or 2 felonies, but I investigated them and then handed them off, so I didn't prosecute them. But in the felonies that I did assist in, there were times where you would have co-defendants, right? You'd have somebody who would plead, you'd have 2 people who were maybe involved, and you had enough to charge both people, but you obviously had one person who was more culpable than the other, right? One person who may have just been there, and one person. So generally, sometimes you'll say, well, listen, we're looking for restitution for the victims, this. If somebody if one of you guys want to plead to that, if one of you guys are guilty and want to plead to that, then fine. So sometimes these type of bargains are made, especially if you have, there's a difference between I'm going to prosecute your family if you don't plead guilty, then I'm going to prosecute these other criminals that I have probable cause committed crimes. But if you want to plead guilty to their crimes to absolve them, then that's a different story. And I know and I know people are like, we're trying to be so technical about it, but that's generally the way it's played. I'm not going to tell you I'm going to prosecute somebody unfairly. That's unethical and illegal. But if I have, like I think in Flynn's case, they had enough evidence to bring charge against other people, then you can technically use that and say, well, your son did this. Here's the evidence. We're going to prosecute him unless, you're going to make a deal and you don't want us to prosecute him. But we have enough evidence to do so. Does that make sense? I know it's cold, but that's just the way the game is played.
No, it makes total sense. I was also thinking by analogy to how confessions by the police are done and what shocks the conscience. So typically, as you are well aware, the police can somewhat mislead you in order to obtain a confession. But there are certain things that are considered beyond the pale, things that shock the conscience. And a classic example is threatening someone that they're going to take away their kids if they don't confess. So that's wrong. That's wrong. So the police can say, we have a witness, or we have blood evidence, or we have it on camera, even if none of those things are true.
Deception. Listen.
One of your other co-conspirators has already confessed. You might want to confess too.
I am going to be honest. Yes, when I was in law enforcement and I became an investigator, we lied to suspects to get confessions. Right? It happened all the time. It's just the way. Yeah. Now, it's interesting because when I became an ADA, you can't lie to suspects.
Yeah, I know. So which is strange. But my point was, like, if it shocks the conscience for a police officer to threaten a person's children as part of a confession, and that invalidates that confession, then surely it must be equally shocking for the prosecutor or the FBI to say, we're going to go after your kids if you're Sullivan, and somehow like that would come out differently. Shocks my conscience.
Well, I would say this.
That doesn't fly for me.
If I'm a cop and I'm saying I'm going to go after your kids if you don't confess, I think that's different than I have all this evidence that your kids did X, Y, and Z, and we are considering prosecuting them based on this evidence. And now you make a decision whether now you can make a decision whether you're going to give it up, or do we have to just go through the whole process? Those deals are made all the time. Those deals, and I know it's ugly, right? I used to tell people, when I used to train at the academy, we had a police academy to train. I used to say, law enforcement is ugly. When you have to put your hands on somebody and take them down, it's ugly. It always looks ugly. You know, people always look at the TV shows and put your hands behind your back and people will walk down to that shit don't happen. People run, people fight, and it's never pretty. When you understand the reality of it, it just isn't pretty. But if the prosecutor, if I'm a prosecutor and I have enough evidence, right? If I have legitimate evidence and probable cause to believe you committed a crime and your child, you know, if he's an adult, if your child committed a crime, and I can then use that evidence to say, well, listen, this is what I'm thinking about, and how do you want to resolve this? And if you want to resolve it for your child too, then that's fine. But if you don't, then I think I'm legally bound to bring charges against that person. You know, I understand it doesn't sound right. It doesn't feel right, but that's the system we live in. As long as it's ethical, though. As long as it's ethical.
Watching You Daily gave me $5. Just go through a few super chats here that happened along the way. Let's see. Go back to Sanchez, who said, "Well done, gents. Thank you very much, Sanchez, for your super chat. It is appreciated."
Thanks,
Tony gave me
Sanchez.
$5 and says, "What if when this goes to the Supreme Court, Robert says it's become so tainted, it's a political question of the entire case." That would be hilarious. I love that outcome. Somehow this becomes a political question. That'd be irritating too. Watching You Daily says, "Did the en banc allow Sullivan to allow the Amkey?" They haven't said that. The issue is a lot more on the mandamus. So I guess the only issue is whether the mandamus would issue. So if the mandamus doesn't issue, then I guess he's allowed his amici. So technically that's kind of a side issue, but it'll be decided by the result here. And then he says the plea is invalid on his face because it would prevent him challenging it with Brady evidence. Well, unfortunately, you know, when you plea, they don't have to give you evidence because you're saying you're guilty. So it's like there's no evidence to exonerate me. So what they have to give you in terms of Brady evidence or other evidence, if you plea, it's like they don't have to give it to you as much, which is like, yeah, not so good.
I don't know. All right, I'll say this as a former prosecutor, Brady evidence turnover, right? Whenever I get Brady evidence, it's got to go. You can't hold. You'll lose your license for holding on to Brady evidence. You as a prosecutor, if you have
that,
Brady
how
evidence,
many prosecutors lose their license name?
No, well, if a prosecutor is holding on to Brady evidence, you can lose your license. It's something that you turn over immediately without question. Like that. That's how serious Brady evidence is. But everybody thinks all evidence is Brady evidence, right? Which is just not true. It's technically not true. I don't know. I've heard about some of the evidence in the Flynn case, but if it reaches up to a particular portion of Brady, I don't know. And I would also say the second point is it all depends on when this evidence becomes available. If you've pled guilty, then I would then me as the prosecutor can only turn that evidence over to the court to say, hey, we've had this new evidence. We believe this person should be found not guilty, or now you should appeal this ruling. And that happens all the time. I've done those exonerations with people where we say, well, hold on, we've had, like, for instance, I used to do exonerations for prostitutes. So my job at the DA's office was to evaluate. We had horrible laws against prostitution here in New York. So before human trafficking became something that was known, that this was something that was prevalent in the community. The police department and the law enforcement here in the city used to just arrest and prosecute all prostitutes, right? And they never asked them the question: were they being human trafficked? Were they being sex trafficked? Were they being forced to do this? So 5 or 10 years later, when society finally found out that a lot of these women who we were arresting for prostitution, giving them felony convictions and misdemeanor for convictions, were not doing it out of their own volition. They were being forced to do it. They were being coerced. They were being coerced. Their families were being coerced, and this and this and that. So what they would have us do is that women who were convicted of these prostitution crimes, if they could show that there was any type of, I'm talking about really like any type of sex trafficking or anything like that, we would vacate their convictions, right? So they would come in, and there were times where these women would give their stories, and I would sit there and cry with them, and we would go, and we would know they were totally innocent, right? These women were totally innocent, right? They were being forced sometimes at gunpoint, and they would have pictures and all this stuff, and it was crazy. It was over insane. Even in that point, right? That's as Brady as you can possibly get. We couldn't just say you're free and everything was all good. We still had to take that evidence, because they had already been convicted, to a judge and say, this is what we find. This is why we believe this conviction is not correct. And the judge would evaluate that and say, okay, yes, and then vacate that conviction. That's what I think should have happened here in the Flynn case, where you have this, he's more or less said he did it. He's under perjury. The judge now has to evaluate whether the new evidence that's come in, is enough to say, okay, well, this conviction should be overturned, or him pleading guilty should be overturned because this evidence is strong enough to do it. That's the judgment on the merits. But again, this lower court judge did not get the chance to make that decision.
Tony asks, can we get a definition of Brady evidence? Nate, can you give us a definition of Brady evidence, please?
You know what? Let me do this. Let me Google it, because every time I do it, I mess it up. But it's usually
Maryland.
Brady v Maryland. It's generally anything that tends to show the defendant's not guilty. But I'll read you guys the formal definition. But that's generally what it is. It's anything that could tend to show if the defendant's not guilty. Brady v Maryland. Here it is. Brady is exculpatory evidence that might exonerate the defendant. And the piece to Brady that you really have to hone in on is might. It's a really anything that might show that the defendant is innocent. That's a really big standard, but the Supreme Court has refined it a little bit to show like certain things are, if a piece of evidence can exonerate, that's something that you definitely want to turn over. But if it's something that may not exonerate, then it's a little less here. But when you're a prosecutor, you generally turn over everything to the defense anyway, right? There's no such thing as trial by ambush and for a prosecutor, so they usually have everything anyway. So and just so everybody knows, exculpatory evidence is. Go ahead. You're about to read something.
No, that's exactly the question. What does exculpatory mean?
Well, you know what? Instead of me chopping it up, let me go to Google, because I was about to do it, but
Tony was asking what does exculpatory mean, and then you were going to talk about it anyway. So I was like, no, I don't want to take it back. Just tell me what you're saying.
It's funny because one time I was doing a stream like this, and I was doing all these definitions from my mind, and I was like, you know what? I can just read them. Why do I have to give you bad definitions? All right, exculpatory evidence is anything that clears someone of something, of guilt or blame, right? Exculpatory comes from the Latin word that means to exculp. So there was a case, actually, I found some exculpatory evidence in one of my cases. There was it was a case in which, all right, so this happened. So the police raid a unlicensed bar. So they raid the unlicensed bar. So you got like 6 cops. They raid the unlicensed bar. So they raid the unlicensed bar, and they go in and they find like a book, and that book has all these gambling debts and all this other stuff. So they find like this big gambling ring. It's like a huge case, right? We got him, right? It's the cops, right? So I'm the one on call. So they give me the case. So I'm sitting there like, shit, I got this big case. I got like 5 cops I got to interview now. So I go in. So the cop who actually found the incriminating evidence, he wasn't there. He was on vacation. So I had the other cops who actually made the arrest come in. So I'm talking to those cops, and they all say, so I'm like, how did you guys find this evidence, this book? This book is fantastic. It's a game changer. So all of them said that when they went into the place, they saw a book on the table, right? So they secured it. And then they said when they went to turn around, and then all of a sudden the book was gone. So they said they were looking around for the book, and when they went outside, they saw somebody with a bulge under their shirt, right? They grabbed the guy and asked him, hey, what's the bulge in this shirt? He says he doesn't know anything. And then the book miraculously fell on the floor. They picked it up, and good, right? So I said, oh, great, guilty, So then I interviewed the actual arresting officer, the person who found the book, right? So this is one thing as a prosecutor. You don't go and ask leading questions for confirmation. You ask what happened. Like, I don't say, oh, the other guy said you found the book. I just say, well, what happened? You tell me in your own words. So this guy says, Yeah, man, I went inside there and I saw the book, and then we turned around and the book was gone, and we were looking for the guy, and we grabbed him, and I said, "Where's the book? Where's the book?" And he was just acting like he didn't have the book. So so then we lifted up his shirt, and I took the book, and now we got the book, and he had the book, blah blah blah. So I said, "Oh, the book didn't just fall out." He's like, "Nah, we grabbed him up and we arrested him and searched him." So now we got a big issue, right? We got a big issue. They were initially. This book was just found on the floor, right? It was in plain sight, as evidence found. Now we have a search. We have someone who's been detained, searched with no probable cause, right? No probable cause. There's no probable cause for this search. They just see a guy outside, grab him up, and where's the book? And, search him and find the book. That's a big issue. So I had to turn that over after I found out. This was days after. So I had to turn this over to the defense attorney. And obviously the first thing he did is motion to dismiss. We throw out the book. And the judge said, "Yeah, we got to throw out the book," because there was no reason to just search this guy. He wasn't a threat. He wasn't this. He wasn't that. So that's how it sometimes works, where you learn after the fact, like, okay, there's a serious issue. So now we have to overturn it. So that's my experience. That's one of my only experiences with exculpatory evidence.
The one honest guy, right? If you have five officers have a different story. Now, was it possible that those 5 officers may have been deliberately misinforming you in some respects? And perhaps they had coordinated their stories, and the guy on vacation didn't get the memo. Is that a thing that might have happened?
You know what? You never know, because stories. I don't want to impugn them in that way. Mm-hmm. And the reason why I'm going to say this is that you're probably right? Let's just tell this story. We know we can get it in. But in the last guy, I was like, oh shit, I didn't hear the story. But I generally think in the heat of the moment, everybody kind of thinks something happened, and they all come in with the same story, and then you get the one guy, and then you're prosecuted. You say, okay, all right, you guys made a mistake, don't worry about it, and the case has to go. But that's generally the way we would resolve it, unless it's something outrageous, where we can say, okay, you lied to us. And I've seen many times cops come in and lie and get prosecuted for lying to us. So it does happen. It does happen.
The police get prosecuted for lying?
If they come and lie to me under oath, yeah, they will be prosecuted. Yeah.
There's hope.
There's
hope somewhere in the world.
It happens. Well, it happens in the Bronx, and then when I was in Brooklyn, it happened in Brooklyn too. So
sweet.
It's crazy. Yeah.
Well, that's good. That's good news to know that somewhere that when they have a whole phrase for a test of lying. It's nice to know when the police are someone somewhere is trying to hold them accountable, like professionals. That might be a good thing. Yeah. Nate, maybe that's why you're not a DA anymore, because you're one of the good guys.
Oh no. I'm gonna be honest with you. Everybody who I met at the DA's office wanted to do the right thing, wanted to do the right thing legally, and it's always a pressure point, right? Because the problem is that most of the people who are at the DA's office are young, fresh out of law school, especially when you're dealing with this. And I was coming from a law enforcement background. So I knew the cop tricks, because I did those tricks. I did the trick where, a pat down turns into a search, and, you have to say it this way so the DA knows that it's all good, that type of thing. It happens. If you don't think it happens in reality, it happens, right? People cut corners. And in the DA's office, the problem is that you have young people who are unexperienced with the game, with the street game. And you have these cops come in and they know how to sweet talk you. They know how to do this. They know how to do this. And they put you in a position where, do you believe us as the police, or do you believe this guy? And sometimes as a prosecutor, you kind of have to step back and say, well, we don't represent the cops. We don't represent the defendant. We represent the people. And our goal is just truth. And whatever the truth is, I remember in our training, when the DA training, they used to always say, you could never get in trouble for the truth coming out unless you tried to hide it. And I always took that for a fact. Well, if it's the truth, it's the truth. That's why I used to always say everything. One time I got in trouble. I'm at the DA's office because I sent over. They used to play this game where they didn't want you to send over everything because there was a quirk in the law that said certain information that you get for defendants, you don't have to send to them. But I used to send everything over, right? Because I didn't want to do trial by ambush. And one of the things I sent over was just great for the defendant. So he used it to get out of it. And so my boss was like, why did you send that to him? We could have held that to the eve of trial. Because I was like, because I don't think it would have been fair. I just don't think it would have been fair. I don't want to do trial, but if I'm going to win, I'm going to win right. And he got the case dismissed, so we didn't have to do a trial, which was best for me. But it was still, it's what's fair is fair. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, well, that's very refreshing to hear, Nate. I just say very quickly for the 138 of you who are currently watching the stream, thank you very much for being here. And if you have not already done so, if you would be so kind as to give me a like or give this stream a like. And if you're not a subscriber, please subscribe. And somewhere on your screen, there should probably be a join button. And if you press the join button for 99 cents a month, you too can become an uncivilian and you will be cool and I will like you more. And also don't forget to visit our friend Nate's channel, Nate the Lawyer, and subscribe to him because he is also awesome and great and provides different perspectives. And we want to show Nate love. Don't forget to go visit Nate and subscribe to him. So subscribe to me, smash my like button, and then go to Nate's channel and just load up a video. Any video will be fine, and like that. Any video, just like the video because you enjoy having him here and you want to see more of him.
No, I definitely enjoy this. I enjoy our conversations because you know what, it's very rare that you can actually talk about the intricacies of the law, like this Flynn thing. I can't talk to anybody else about because no one kind of gets those intricacies.
You're making some extremely thin technical points, and I understand exactly what you mean by being able to talk to people because you're making some very fine legal points, and I can actually follow along and on the page, and I understand your frustrations. Like you can't talk to people because they don't have the requisite background to be able to follow along on the page. And whether I agree or disagree with you in sort of the end conclusion, at least we understand. I understand the map, right? I understand the map that and I can follow along. It's like, okay, we want to create this bifurcation in this trial. We want to say that there was guilty plea. They lose authority here. We want to say that the Court of Appeals acted prematurely because this should have been something the judge had the authority to decide, rightly or wrongly. And if we reverse it, so it's a timing issue. And so it's process and blah, blah, blah. And so it's like, oh, okay, I can follow along every step of the way, whether I agree or disagree. It's like I follow along and we can actually have a conversation because we speak the same language. It's nice.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. Yeah, it is nice. Well, don't forget, I got people saying, I might not be an attorney, so you got to be careful.
Well, if you're not an attorney, you're doing a really good job of faking it because you're making some very complicated, nuanced points. And I'm like, I understand what's going on here. And I understand the lines that you're trying to draw and how you're trying to differentiate this. And I'm like, I'm not sure I 100% buy it, but I at least understand it, right? It's like,
that's why they call them arguments, right? That's what they call them arguments.
That's what they call arguments.
I want to ask you, this is something that's been dying for me to ask you. What do you think?
Two more super chats real quick.
Okay, go ahead.
Tommy S says, you two should do a non-sec make for YouTube. Let me just do this entire thing over again. Timmy S says, you two should do a non-sec made for YouTube play, a la R. Kelly Trapped in the Closet. NTL is Kyle, UCL is Reeds, Kevin Spacey for Steve. Can you all sing? I can try, man.
Oh my God.
I can try. I'm not sure you want me to, but I can try.
That'd be so good.
Tony from... I'm up for anything, man. $2 from Tony Neve. Predictions on Rashad Brooks moving forward. Don't have a really strong opinion on that particular one.
You don't have a strong opinion on? Yes, you do have a strong. That's the Atlanta shooting at the Wendy's Parking Mall. The one that you said the one that you said the DA should be locked up.
Then I have an unbelievably strong opinion on it.
Yeah, you said the DA is supposed to be locked up. How can you not? That's not a strong opinion.
The entire case against Rashad is complete crap. It is a total bogus crap show. I can't believe that they're bringing charges. It makes no logical sense. It should be dismissed, and the prosecutor should probably be flogged. Can we bring back flogging?
And that's not his strong opinion, people. That's not his strong opinion.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh my God. That it's funny because that DA, I don't know how he sleeps at night with that charge.
No, it makes no sense.
Like. You literally a couple of weeks ago say a taser is a deadly weapon and charge cops.
I remember you saying that.
A dangerous weapon. And it's so crazy because I went through and I was like, let me actually do the research on this. I went to the police policy. I found the Supreme Court case. I found his old clips. Like I went through it. I said, here it all is. And I was like, I don't see any way you can charge this cop. And guess what he goes at the end does? Charge the cop on some BS shit. So I don't know.
Yes. So before that diversion, before we got into Rashad and me forgetting who Rashad was, what were you trying to say before I interrupted you for the super chats?
Oh, I totally forgot. Maybe somebody could have to remind me.
Sorry about that. Yeah, sorry. Cool. Before you started a new point, I wanted to make sure to honor the super chats.
I remember what I was going to ask you. The election thing that's going on now. They now he's floating postponing the elections because he says
that's dumb.
I like that outrages me to the point where this is simply like if any other president did, because a lot of people say, what if Obama did this, right? Let's say Bush did this, or Clinton did this, or even Obama. I think Obama would have been it. I think people would be marching in the streets. But why aren't people as enraged with Trump, right? I don't know. Maybe it's just something I'm just not saying. Yes, we should auto him. What do you think?
Oh yeah, no, I'm down for that. But I think partly it is because Trump says so much stupid stuff at large that it's just part of the noise. Because if any other person had said it, it would be notable. But Trump says so much stupid crap all the time that it's not as notable. So I think it's outrageous, but he just says a lot of crap. $10 from Enforcer. Love you guys. Thank you for the perspective and content. You are most welcome. I'm glad you enjoy this. Yeah, so I think legally, of course, it makes absolutely no sense.
So
the date is set by Congress. It's been the first Tuesday in November for quite a while.
It's a national holiday. Quite a while. It's a holiday. Election day is a holiday.
Is it?
It's a federal holiday. You don't know Election day is a federal holiday? Yeah.
No, it's not.
No,
Election day is a federal holiday?
I
don't think it is. I don't think Election day is a federal holiday. I think you're wrong, Nate.
Let me see. Because I know we used to have school off. And I said, oh, it's a holiday. Election day. Is it a holiday? Election day, holiday. Maybe you're right. Maybe I might be wrong.
Yeah, I don't think Election day is a federal holiday.
Yeah, Election day is a holiday.
Is it federal?
General election set forth earliest possible Tuesday. Blah, blah, blah. Is it a federal holiday? No, it doesn't say it is. It's strange. Oh, maybe it's not.
Yeah, no, I'm pretty sure.
No,
yeah,
it's not.
It's not.
Yeah. Election day is a public holiday in some states. In my state, it's a public holiday. That's why. It's not a federal holiday. It's a state and local
state holiday. Yeah.
All right. Yeah. Sam? All right.
That's all right. Yeah, it probably should be, but no, it's not.
It's a holiday for us in New York.
It's been a holiday for you in New York. Yeah. So it's the first Tuesday of November. It's been the first Tuesday of November for quite a long time. I'm not even sure when, but it's been the first Tuesday of November. And it doesn't even make sense theoretically because we have an electoral college. And so the states can designate how to do electoral college. So, if worse came to worse and for some reason people couldn't vote, that's okay because we have an electoral college system. Yeah, so in some sort of hypothetical universe where for some reason people couldn't go out to vote, then I guess the state legislatures would just have to decide amongst themselves who they're voting for, which they can do because it's an electoral college. We just had a case from the U.S. Supreme Court about this, how the states can designate the electors. So it doesn't even make hypothetical sense. So no, and of course, if for some reason that didn't work, then we would go to the Presidential Succession Act because President Trump's term ends on January the 20th at noon. It ends. So if for some reason the Electoral College can't meet, then we go into our figuring out who the next line of succession is.
Well, it wouldn't be the vice president.
We wouldn't have a vice president because the vice president's term also ends the same.
And the Speaker of the House too.
In this hypothetical, we didn't have an election because that was the premise, right? So we didn't have an election, so we have no Speaker of the House.
So there are no federal officers.
I don't know how that works because I don't know how that would technically work. So, is it Secretary of State?
You would have to go. Well, you would have to go to the first office that's not that's not barred by the election. So like you're like one of the secretaries because they actually have to resign when a new president comes in.
I don't know if they have to resign,
but they do resign. Yeah, it's a courtesy.
So maybe they don't resign. So that would make the Secretary of State the next in line, which is what's his name? Who is the Secretary of State?
It would be it's Pompeo.
Oh yeah, okay. So we have President Pompeo. That'd be entertaining.
But he would just be acting.
We have rules for this.
Yeah, he would just be acting. But the thing is that let's say for most of you people out there, let's say if there wasn't an election, the fact of the matter is that the electoral college is who picks the president anyway. So even if they were, as long as the electoral college meets, and I think that's a nightmare scenario for Democrats because most of the state legislatures are Republican controlled, right? So the Texas state legislature, Florida state, and Ohio. All of those are going for Trump. Most of the country's state legislatures are Republicans. So,
well, you'd have to actually count electoral votes, not just state legislatures, but yeah. So
the state legislatures say who their electoral votes go to, right?
Sure, but saying the majority of states are Republican controlled isn't quite the same thing as saying the majority of the electoral college would be Republican controlled, because the majority of the states may not have a majority of the electoral votes because they're not allocated evenly. Well, so you'd actually have to count like who. But yes, I think you're right that it would be Republican.
Thinking Ohio, Republican controlled legislature. Florida, Republican controlled. Texas, Republican controlled legislature.
Yeah.
So those big three swing states automatically go to the Democrats. Pennsylvania has a Republican controlled legislature, right?
Yeah.
Wisconsin.
I think you're right. I think that's how that would pan out.
Yeah, you got a lot of these. Virginia goes down. Well, Virginia just went Democrat, but you got North Carolina, South Carolina, Georgia. All those are Republican strongholds. So all those votes go. All the South. Yeah, I think you'd have an interesting scenario.
The whole thing is stupid, though, and Trump is stupid for saying it. And I don't know what he's thinking, whether or not it's an attempt at distraction or whatever. But it's a fundamentally dumb thing to say, and it's a fundamentally un-American thing to say. And if he actually tried to do it, I'd be considering, like, at that point, I'd be considering. I say this with all the love possible, but I do have an oath. I do have a belief in the Constitution of the United States. So if Trump tried to hold office beyond that, I'd be thinking about taking up arms at that point because
revolution.
We have those. Well, it's a revolution to reinstate the Constitution. So I'm not sure that qualifies as a revolution or not. If I have a revolution for the purpose of trying to reinstate the Constitution, I'm not sure that qualifies as a revolution. It's something, but yeah,
a devolution.
Yeah, I don't know what that is, but at that point, yeah, I'd be looking at like, yeah, this guy has to be forcibly expelled because that we have rules. And Trump is not beyond those rules. Trump got properly elected, and if Trump is not reelected for whatever reason, he's got to go. And I was pointing out to this minor hilarity is like if we do have an election and Biden wins and Trump just like refuses to leave office, then that's great because that means the feds get to arrest him for trespass. So wouldn't that be ironic that the thing we finally get Trump on is trespass because he refuses to leave the White House? It's like, you got to go. No. Okay. Now you're trespassing.
Now you're trespassing.
What? Yeah. It's like, well, your term ran out. You got to go, man. The Secret Service will now escort you out the door.
I think if Trump loses the election, he's got a lot of parts he's got to get out before he gets out of there. He's got to do the Bill Clinton thing. Pardon everybody for the last day because
pardon everybody. That's right. Well,
because they're going to go after them. As soon as they're going to go after them. And I know a lot of people who watch the stream may think I'm a Biden supporter. I'm going to vote for Joe Biden. It's not a secret, but I don't like Joe Biden. I think Biden is maybe even a worse liar than Trump. Did you heard about when Biden did the plagiarism? Like he plagiarized in law school. Like
yeah. That's old scandal. But yeah. He plagiarized a lot of stuff, man.
Yeah, Biden is just like he plagiarized. It's funny because I was telling my wife about this. I was like, he plagiarized in law school. She's like, that's nothing. Don't worry about it. It's something. I'm like, as a lawyer, usually if you plagiarize in law school, you get kicked out. He just had the political, things that where he can continue to go. But you usually can't plagiarize in law school and be okay. You know what I'm saying? That's your academic integrity. So I don't know how he got through it, but.
Well, everyone knows that we're really electing the vice president, right?
That's true for Biden, yeah.
And so then the question of who is, and I hope it's not Kamala Harris, but that looks like the scuttlebutt. It's Kamala Harris.
But like that whole thing with the whole paper, like let the people we got his notes. That's all like that was staged. I was like, that was staged. My wife was like, no, it's not staged. They just got a snapshot. He's talking about Kamala. I said, babe, that was staged. And then I showed her the clip of John Bolton with his 5,000 troops to Cuba. When he had it written on the notepad to scare Venezuela. It's like they stage that. They write something down, let you see it, and you're like, oh my God. They're saying something without saying something. He wants to test Kamala Harris. So he throws that out there. We're all talking about it, and if it's goodwill, she'll be on. If it's bad will, then let's get somebody else.
Yeah, no, not my candidate of choice. I think Tammy Duckworth is more interesting.
Tammy's good, pretty good, yeah.
Yeah, and that Republican governor, or not everyone's talking about the Secretary of State, Republican.
Oh, you're talking about not secretary. You're talking about the UN, this former UN ambassador Nikki Haley.
No, I was talking about Rice, Susan Rice.
Oh, Susan Rice. Susan Rice would be good, but don't forget she got a lot of baggage with her too, though. You know.
Yeah. So a lot of people have been talking about Susan Rice. Of course, I think the best pick that Biden will not do is the Hawaiian representative.
Oh hell no, nah.
Yeah, no.
Nah. They think she's a Russian operative, right?
she's a toady. Apparently, she's an authoritarian toady. I mean, she's perfect though. She's diverse. She's a war veteran. She's a woman. She's everything you need, man. So it's like, why not? I think she would be the best. I think you get a lot of Republican votes for her, to be quite honest. So
yeah, but it all depends. But right now, it doesn't. You don't need Republican votes. What you need is Democrat. What you need is independents, because those are the people who swing the election. So as long as you got the independents behind you, and I think that's what Trump lost. Yeah. Trump lost the independents. Tulsi Gabbard, yeah, and she's still suing Google and all this stuff. So
yeah, apparently she's going to be a Fox News contributor. That was announced too.
And that's
entertaining.
That makes sense. She should be a Fox News contributor. So that makes sense. So what's the plan for the rest? What's the plan for the weekend? Anything good?
Well, we're still here in shutdown land in Texas, as I'm sure you know from the news. So everything is kind of shut down and kind of sucks as a result. So, I live theoretically in the middle of the music district in Austin. I live in Red River District, which is the center of the music, and there's no music because all the places are closed. It's very, very sad for me. So my plan is, I don't know, weeping, gnashing teeth, commiserating about the loss of freedom and joy in my life.
Oh, you get to make a lot of YouTube videos, and you get to read a lot of cases. That's one thing I've been realizing. I have some cases that I have to kind of finish off, some negotiations I have to go through, and that's just the good part about it is you have a lot of time to do it, but the bad part about it is like now
continuing to find someone to do my thumbnails on a regular basis. Right now,
you don't just do a Fiverr, baby.
I am doing Fiverr right now. That's what I'm doing. I've got two different people on Fiverr who seem to be doing an okay job. I got 3 people who didn't do a good job, so I'm still vetting people on Fiverr to find someone who can do something that works for me on a regular basis.
There's also like Upwork and I forgot the other one. I used Upwork before, which is pretty good. But I think Upwork, and there's one from the Philippines that was really good. I got to find that link for you but the rates are like you can put them on like payroll, so you pay them like $50 a month and they'll do all your thumbnails for you, which is pretty good. But I forgot it's from the Philippines though. But they're really good. But you just got to get somebody who you can explain stuff to, and but as soon as you find somebody who's good, $50 a month, and they'll do your thumbnails, up to a certain amount, obviously.
Yeah, no, if you find that link, please message me. I'd be very interested in checking that out.
Yeah, I'll send it to you.
$50 a month is reasonable. We're bringing in more than enough revenue to justify that, and it would help with people, clicking and being entertained. I've noticed that it's had a huge uptake. It might be also the quality of my stuff, but I've noticed that the thumbnails and the other thing too, and I don't know why I'm surprised by this, but I am. It's like if I forget to do the outro or forget to put it on, I don't get subs that day. But if I put the outro where I actually say, please subscribe to the channel, I get subs. So it makes a difference whether or not I ask. And I'm like, okay.
But that's what they say. All the stuff tells you you got to ask. You got to ask. And you've been extremely consistent too. You consistently upload, and your stuff is good too, though. So I think it's also the quality. If you got good quality stuff, people are going to watch.
I think the quality of my stuff is getting better.
Yeah,
it's I'm learning how to do this job better. I've basically hired myself as a professor in my own mind, and so I've done my first year of teaching. I thought it went well, and we'll just learn how to be professor better. And I've been pleased recently with my own product. It's nice when you do something. The one I did yesterday was with the Texas corruption, and I thought the jokes were good and funny, and the pacing was good, and my own reactions were good. So I'm getting better.
Can you know what they always say this? If you can watch your own videos, you're onto something. Because I remember some earlier videos I couldn't watch.
Have you ever had the displeasure of watching some of the videos that are produced by some actual law professors at actual law schools?
Yes.
It makes you want to die inside.
Oh my God, yes.
It makes you want to die inside. So apparently I'm already a better professor than 90% of the professionals in my field. That's good news.
I'm gonna give you a secret, right? So when I was a professor at the law school, I had a YouTube channel that I would send my students to just for like when I was teaching, just so they can have the lecture again. So there's a channel out there that has me teaching like in a law school capacity. And I looked at it and it is so cringeworthy because you don't know what you're doing. You know what I'm saying? You just put a camera on and just start talking and it is cringy. But it's good.
The video is horrible. The audio is atrocious.
I mean, because you don't think about that stuff.
It's across the board atrocious. And the presentation stuff, and there always seems to be that huge hum. I don't know what that hum is, but every single one of these professors has that huge hum in the video, like a massive air conditioner or something. It's unbelievably distracting. And the presentation style is so flat, and it makes you want to die inside. And I'm like, apparently, somehow, I'm a better professor of law than 90% of the people who call themselves professionals.
It's just presentation, man.
I don't know how this is a thing where I became better than 90% of the professionals. But man, don't ever watch these videos because it's atrocious. So
it's pretty bad.
It's pretty bad.
It's pretty bad.
It's pretty
bad. But again, that shows that we're on the front of the wave. You know, we are on the front of the wave. Legal's out there suing the federal government for classified state secrets. So you know,
I didn't see the one he posted yesterday where he did a FAQ or something. I'm like, I don't know that I want to watch anymore.
Do you think it's going to be successful? Do you think it's going to get the state seat? I'm like, if you can't get Trump's tax, you know, the Congress can't get Trump tax returns.
Because a lot of this has already been vetted by a judge. A lot of it, when it's already been vetted by a judge, been saying that a lot of it should be classified. So I don't see how. I mean, it's in a parallel case. But still, I don't see really. I mean, he might get a bone thrown at him, but I don't really see him getting really anywhere with it anywhere.
It's funny because I remember one time we subpoenaed something from the government, and next thing you know, we get all these like 20 pages, and like 19 is blacked out. Everything's redacted until like the last page, like the signature and like 2 lines. I'm like, all right, this is how they play the game. So, you know, it is what it is. But listen, I'm going to have to get out of here because I got 2 kids I got to feed. Awesome. And now we got to play with. But listen, but this has been awesome. Thanks again for having me. And thanks again for you guys. Don't forget, like, share, subscribe. And we're going to be doing this every week. Hopefully it'll be just as fun, right?
Absolutely. So I will let my friend Nate go. And from me to you guys, thank you as always for your attention and your likes and your participation. It helps the channel grow and makes it more enjoyable. And thank you to my friend Nate for this wonderful discussion. Until later, my friends. Peace.
Later. Boom.